Okay, so welcome to Bombala Math. So in this lesson, we're going to do solving linear equations with variables on both sides. In a previous lesson, I did solving linear equations with variables on one side. So it's obviously a natural progression. You can also see the progression and difficulty level of the problems as you're going through. Multi-step, get fractions in number 4. So we're going to work our way and hopefully give you a good variety for solving equations with variables on both sides. So let's just pick up with number 1. Remember that the point is to get the x by itself. We're solving for x, so in order to do that, we have to get the variable isolated and get it by itself. So here, with the variables on both sides, you have to make a decision. Do you want to move the x terms first, or do you want to move the constant terms? It's totally up to you. As long as what you do is correct, it's okay. I typically like to move the variable first to get that to one side. Most students like to put the variable on the left side for some reason. They're more comfortable with that. It really doesn't matter. You can move the variable over to the right side. In some cases, if you move it over to the right side, it keeps the x positive. If you move it over this way, it's going to make it a negative. It really doesn't make a difference. I'll put it on the left side for now because a lot of students, again, are comfortable with that. So if I'm going to move the 7x over, I've got to do the inverse of that. So since this is a plus 7x, I'm going to subtract 7x to both sides. And remember, just put that wall here, just a division of the left and the right side, so you make sure that if you move something over to the other side, you can just keep that wall, that barrier there. So when I do this, that gives me negative 3x minus 5 is equal to, and that's going to be 13. Now I'm down to a two-step, and I got variable on one side. So I got to get rid of the 5. So if I have minus 5, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And that gives me negative 3x is equal to, and then 13 plus 5 is 18. And now I'm down to a one-step. This is a multiplication. So inverse I'm going to do is division. So I'm going to divide by negative 3. And that gives me x is equal to negative 6. And of course, if you take this value and plug it in for x, make sure the left side is equal to the right side, which it works, but that's just a way that you can check the problem. All right, looking at number 2. Similar, except now we have the distributive property we're going to have to do in here because you have this negative 2 in front of these parentheses. So I'm going to want to take care of that first. I don't want to divide by negative 2, which technically you could do, but if I do that over here, it's going to create a bunch of fractions, so I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to distribute this negative 2 first before I do anything else. So in other words, I'm not going to try to move any variables yet until I get rid of those parentheses. So rewrite everything. I know a lot of students will like to just work on that one side and they don't recopy the problem down. Make sure everything flows nicely so that you don't lose anything. Students will just do this work here, leave that, and then start moving stuff and nothing is in line, and that's how you make mistakes. So I'm going to put my barrier here. And now I'm basically back to a problem that's just like number 1. So I want to move the x's to one side, and you can move again to the left or to the right side. This time I'll move it to the right side just to get a variety. So I'm going to move the 3x. So if it's a plus 3x, I got to subtract 3x from both sides. Just fix that equal sign there. And this is going to give me negative 15 is equal to 9x plus 12. So that's all done there. Now I'm back to a two-step with a variable on one side. So I'm going to move this 12. So I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. That gives me negative 27 is equal to 9x. And of course, we're left with a one-step now. I'm going to divide this multiplication right here, 9x. So I'm going to divide by 9. And that gives me x is equal to negative 3. And again, if you plug it into here, you'll see that the left side is equal to the right side. That'll be your check. Moving on to number 3, it is similar to number 2 as well. We have the parentheses, the distributive property, but then I also have another term here. So we want to simplify as much as we can on the left side before we start moving any variables over. So I'm going to distribute this negative 5 first. And remember, when you're distributing, and this is a minus sign, you're going to distribute with the minus sign. So in other words, when you do that and you multiply, these signs are going to wind up changing. So negative 5 times 8x gives me negative 40x. Negative 5 times 7 is minus 35. Bring down my negative 4 equals, and bring down everything else. Set up your barrier there, your line, your wall, so that you keep the left side separate from the right side. And again, make sure you have everything written down, that you didn't miss any of your terms, and that happens quite often. Now here, I have like terms. I could move these over separately, but then I'm just creating extra work. So just go ahead and combine those like terms first, and then you'll wind up with a problem similar to this, where it's one variable on either side, and then you have the common terms, the constant terms on either side as well. So it'll look like this right here. So I have negative 40x minus 39 is equal to negative 7 minus 8x. So that's good, took care of that. Now you can move the variable over to one side. You can move this over to here or this over to here. I'll just move it to the left side this time. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to add to the opposite, the inverse. I'm going to add 8x. So that gives me negative 32x minus 39 is equal to negative 7. Now I have to move the minus 39. So in the inverse, I'm going to add 39. So negative 32x is equal to 32. That worked out nicely. And then last thing, I'm going to divide by negative 32. So x is equal to negative 1. And again, if you plug it in to the left and the right side, that should be equal, which it will. All right, the last problem, number 4, the fractions. And of course, my students always hate that when I put the fractions on there. Most students just don't like working with fractions. But we can take care of that. So if you look at this problem, one option is you could just go ahead and move this over to here or move this over to here. You're not going to get rid of the fractions. You have to actually work with them if you're going to do that, which is fine. Or we can just get rid of the fractions right in the beginning. Well, how are we going to do that? Here you have a denominator of 2, and then here you have a denominator of 3. So if we find a number that 2 and 3 go into evenly, we can multiply the entire equation by that number, and the fraction will go away. So one of the easiest things to do is just 2 times 3. If you multiply is 6, that's obviously going to be a common factor. So I'm going to multiply the entire equation by 6 to get rid of the fractions. So if I do that, I'm going to rewrite it. All right, so now I'm going to multiply the 6 times all of the terms in the equation. First, let me put my barrier here. So keep that lined up. So I'm going to multiply 6 times 1/2 x. That's going to be 6 over 2, which reduces to 3x. Then 6 times 9, which is 54. And then 6 times 2/3 x is going to be 12/3, which is going to reduce to 4x. And then 6 times negative 1 is minus 6. Now, I'm basically back to a problem like number 1. So I'm going to move the variable over, and I'll just move the 4x over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 4x, and then that will give me negative 1x plus 54 is equal to negative 6. Now I'm going to move the 54 over, so do the inverse. So I'm going to subtract 54. And I get negative x is equal to negative 60. Now remember, we're solving for positive x, so we want to get rid of this negative 1, which of course it's multiplication, so we're going to do the inverse, which is dividing by negative 1. And we get x is equal to positive 60. And of course, you can plug that in, you'll see the left side equals the right side. So hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. There'll be more lessons to come. You can see that on my YouTube channel at One Battle Math. And like my first pair used to say, make smart choices. See you next time.